Hello and welcome to a special edition, a special highlights edition of Frost Over the World. This week I'll be looking back at some of the most interesting and indeed important interviews we've had over the past few weeks. But we begin with the story which dominated the headlines in December and other months besides. WikiLeaks. The whistleblowing website began releasing 250,000 US diplomatic cables, provoking horror and embarrassment in the United States. At the same time, the website's founder, Julian Assange, was fighting extradition to Sweden on some different sexual assault charges. His lawyer, Mark Stevens, sensed a conspiracy. Do you think they want, the extradition authorities in America actually want to get him within their ken, as it were, to go for them on the WikiLeaks front?
Yes, I think that the Americans are much more interested in terms of the WikiLeaks aspects of this. And we have heard from the Swedish authorities that there has been a secretly impaneled grand jury in Alexandria, which some people you'll certainly know is just over the river from Washington, D.C., next to the Pentagon. And they are currently investigating this. And indeed, the Swedes, we understand, have said that if he comes to Sweden, they will defer their interest in him to the Americans. Now, that shows some level of collusion and embarrassment. So it does seem to me that what we have here is nothing more than a holding charge, which the Americans won't really matter to them whether he's being held in Sweden or here, as long as he's kind of detained, so that ultimately they can get their mitts on him. Because
some of the quotes from Americans have been extraordinary, haven't they, about this, about the WikiLeaks part of the story. Sarah Palin said he's an anti-American operative with blood on his hands. Why was he not pursued with the same urgency we pursue Al-Qaeda and Taliban leaders? And Mike Huckabee, who was the presidential candidate, of course, the headline says US Embassy cables culprit should be executed. He goes as far as that. I mean, that is extraordinary, but it makes extradition to the United States seem even less attractive to your client.
It certainly does if he's going to die. And of course we have to remember that the final charge, if it's one of espionage, is the death penalty, which we don't approve of. But interestingly, this is a peculiarly American perspective that you've just articulated. There is an equally interesting perspective from Russia and China, who come out of these cables particularly badly. And the Russians have accused him of being a CIA operative. That's not been widely reported anywhere.
No.
And the cyber attacks appear to have been coming from Russian and Chinese computers, which again is quite interesting given this concern about him. So he does seem to have picked enemies, if you like, with the three major superpowers, Russia, China, and the United States.
Yes. That's a wide-ranging choice, isn't it? Yes, there's an 181 countries in the world, of course. So that
there may be an island he could go to somewhere.
He could have that for free. There are rumours about that there's a secret cache of encrypted and potentially damaging material that WikiLeaks will release if it needs to defend itself. Have you heard anything about that?
Yes, I mean, I've not seen it and I don't have the encryption key, but I am aware that, from reports that 100,000 people have been given encrypted files, and that those people, if WikiLeaks is brought down, will be provided with the encryption key so that the material that WikiLeaks has can ultimately come out and be made available to the public. Their belief is that all of these cables should be released to the public in due course. The plan is that they should be released in an orderly fashion that we've had with WikiLeaks working in with their partners, their traditional media partners have released them. But if at the end of the day, through the cyber attacks or whatever, they are prevented from actually doing it in an orderly fashion, then it will be done in a disorderly fashion. But ultimately, the truth will out is really, I think, where they're coming from on that.
Mark Stevens there. Here in the UK, Julian Assange was granted bail on the Swedish warrant. When I met him in the country house where he was obliged to stay, he was defiant. Obviously, you've denied crimes in that case, vigorously, obviously, and so on. but you presumably don't deny having had sex with them.
I don't talk about, there's things about this matter of public record, but I think it's not right for me to do a couple of things. And it's hard because of different cultural values, but my cultural values is that a man does not talk about his private life and a man does not criticise women. Certainly he doesn't criticise women before he knows all the facts are in. In this case, we have just recently got a translation of part of one of the statements by a close friend of one of the women. And she says that she, one of the women, told her that she was bamboozled by police and other people into this position and she's very unhappy about it. So maybe it's not actually all a scheme from the women, although there is some suggestive evidence that that is true. But maybe it's not. Maybe they are innocent victims who were bamboozled into making statements that they didn't really want to make.
So, but why wouldn't you go back to Sweden in the sense, does it mean you feel, which would be a clear point, I mean, do you feel that you can't get a fair trial in Sweden at the moment?
It's very interesting you asked that point, because this was a point made by the prosecution here, who applied to make sure I was in solitary confinement, that I was denied bail. Then when bail was granted, rightly so, appealed all the way to the High Court to prevent me from being out on bail. And one of the arguments used was that they thought that I thought I would not get a fair trial in Sweden. So if I say that I believe I'm not going to get a fair trial in Sweden, that there's no juries in Sweden, that half the juries are appointed by the Social Democrats, that's how, sorry, not juries, half the panel of judges is appointed by the political party that is involved in this. If I say that sort of thing, suggest that I don't have confidence in the Swedish judicial system, then my bail will be cancelled and I will go to prison. So I have to look into the situation as to whether there is a fair trial possibility in Sweden or not. That is something that we are researching. That is something I want to understand before I'm extradited back to Sweden. What I want to understand is what are the charges? Who is behind this? The prosecution has refused to give to the British courts any evidence, has said that it doesn't need and doesn't want to give any evidence. And by evidence, I don't mean photographs or something like this. By evidence, I mean even the statements, even the initial complaint, it's refusing to hand over. That's not a situation that I feel that it is right to walk into. I feel it is right that since I haven't even been charged, since I am offering to do all sorts of interviews, for them to come here and say, well, we want to talk to you about what exactly. That should happen first. And we have an opportunity in the British legal system, which is more open, to get some of this information out, to find out what this is really about and demonstrate publicly that something is not going on here that is right, that there are clear dirty tricks, at least in the abusive process. How did my name get out in the first place? Why did the most senior prosecutor in Sweden say not only that there was no evidence, she said, I've read everything, there is not even a suspicion that he has committed a rape. Then intervention of this politician, Claes Borgström, comes about, passed off to another prosecutor in Gothenburg, not in Stockholm. What is going on?
Julian Assange. But WikiLeaks is not the only internet story of the moment. It's the 10th birthday of the online encyclopedia Wikipedia, and its founder, Jimmy Wales, came into the studio to celebrate. 10 years on.
Yes, it's amazing.
And it's gone better than you expected?
Yeah, it's been really amazing. From the beginning, I was always very, very optimistic. But I remember looking at a list of the top 100 websites and seeing reference style cited around number 50. And I thought, well, if we do a really great job, we could be in the top 100 or top 50. But now we're the 5th most popular website in the world. 400 million people a month come and visit. So it's become, really amazing and really part of the infrastructure of our world.
One of the key things that you've gone out strongly to raise money. Technically, the value of Wikipedia must be enormous technically, and yet you need cash, and that's because you don't take advertising, I suppose.
That's right. We're a charity, so we're set up as a nonprofit, and so we exist from donations to the general public, and our charitable mission is to give a free encyclopedia to everyone in the world.
Right. Well, that's what you've done. And do you ever wonder? Do you think that advertising would solve your financial difficulties, or do you think that advertising would in some way corrupt the operation?
Well, I think both, of course. Obviously, we could raise a lot of money through advertising, but it would really change the character of the site, and it would change the character of the organization in ways that nobody really wants. I think of Wikipedia as like a temple for the mind, or a national park, or a library. It's a place to go and learn and reflect and think and share ideas, not really a place for commerce.
Not for that. You advertised yourself. You were not paid for that. But I mean, you used your face in terms of getting the message across.
Yeah, it was.
You could use other famous supporters of yours, presumably.
Yeah, we may try that in the future. We did try this year several different faces. I was very reluctant to let the staff use my picture all over the website like that, but we did testing of banners, and that was the one that performed the best. We actually had a contest in the community, beat Jimmy, can you come up with something that brings in more money, and my banner brought in the most, so we ran with that.
And how much did you raise from the whole appeal?
We raised $16 million, which
Right.
is the highest we've ever done, and we raised it in the shortest amount of time this year, so we did it in 50 days. Normally we go longer than that.
And so you might do that every year.
We might do, yeah. I mean, I hope we come up with something more clever so everybody doesn't have to get sick of looking at me all the time. But yes, I mean, we've had our annual fundraiser every December for several years now, and it's a model that works for us. We bring in enough money, and we're happy for the next year.
And what about in terms of moving on from here? Do you want to do anything new with the actual product, quite apart from advertising and so on? Is there something new you want to do with the actual Wikipedia?
Well, the biggest thing that we're looking at is our growth in the languages of the developing world.
Right.
We're in over 200 languages, but a lot of the languages are still quite small. So we're opening our first office outside the U.S. in India to assist the community there with the growth of the Indian language Wikipedias. We've got over 20 different projects there, and some of them are bigger and smaller than others, but they're really poised for a lot of growth.
Of course, the internet has been congratulated and blamed for many things, but not until now blamed for a possible war. I met the Foreign Minister of Costa Rica to learn about what they are calling the Google Maps war. This has been simmering over the years, hasn't it? But it was, in fact, Google who sort of got it all worked up again, didn't it, by their faulty drawing of the map.
Well, this is the only explanation we have here so far. This is 2 months old. We had the Nicaraguan army incursioning and then occupying and building a man-made canal that will link the San Juan River, which is Nicaraguan, to the Caribbean coast through the Costa Rican territory. This is exactly what is happening now.
Right, and so what is going to happen next? I mean, the 50 troops, as we talk here, are still there, as far as we know. We haven't done any phone calls to say that they've fled or whatever else. But what can you do? Because as we said in that intro, famously, that you haven't really had a military army for more than 60 years and so on. Does that mean that with this row, it's possible you'll have to have one again?
Well, not really. Costa Rican people is more decided to keep its way of living. We went to the International Court of Justice demanding Nicaragua to withdraw. We asked the court to issue provisional measures and ask the troops to go out of the Costa Rican territory. In addition to that, Nicaragua has a station 1 kilometer from the Costa Rican invaded site, 600 strong men, and helicopters and the whole military equipment. But we think that at the end, the International Court of Justice and the multilateral system of the UN will support the Costa Rican right of living disarmed and in peace.
How long will that take, do you think?
Well, at the court, the whole thing will take years, probably 4 or 5 years. But the provisional measures, we are expecting them within the next few weeks.
Oh, that would be good news from your point of view. And why do you think, in this situation, that Nicaragua and its leader, Daniel Ortega and so on, took this particular step after the Google Map incident and so on? Was it something to do with, in fact, Mr. Ortega's wanting to win that next election?
Well, he is already running, and certainly that has helped him to pull together his country behind a supposedly territorial claim, and the opposition is non-existent anymore. They disappear from the polls, and he has also said that he will not accept international observers to the next election. And in addition to that, there is a series of pharaonic projects that have been mentioned by him or members of the government, like a new interoceanic canal to compete with Panama and other things. But it seems to me that the most important one was internal politics.
Global politics is, of course, what Frost Over the World specialises in. And when a former president launches a new party, it's only natural that he comes to this studio to announce it. This is a very historic day for you because you're launching a new party. What was it that made you feel that Pakistan, at this moment, needs a new party led by you?
Well, I think, first of all, the environment in Pakistan, the difficulties being faced by the people and the country. And that led me to think whether I could deliver on the political front. Then I personally feel that there is a time has come where we need to introduce a new political culture, maybe shunning dynastic politics, and also bringing out the 60% people who do not normally vote in our elections.
And what is it you think you can really do that the current parties are not doing? What harness those feelings that you just said? Are there changes you would like in the way the country was run?
Certainly, better governance is the key issue. But I personally feel that at this time, what is required to salvage Pakistan and move it forward is a unity of thought and action between three forces, I feel. The political forces, which is the public, the people of Pakistan, and the military, army, and the bureaucracy. I think if one can bring in a unity of thought and action between these three, that is what is required to salvage Pakistan.
Well, obviously, the cooperation of the army is essential, but obviously, after your close links with the army, people might be worried or afraid if the army would have too much power in a country run by you again.
No, I don't think so. In the past, people used to complain that talk against, cast aspersions on my legitimacy because I was a general, a man in uniform, and yet I was a president. Now I'm going to play on their ground. I'm going to be elected by the people of Pakistan. The key issue is whether the people of Pakistan have elected, and we actually need a powerful center, powerful government which can execute many things which need to be done in Pakistan. As I said, there are many things which have to be done to take the country forward, to change the environment of the country. Otherwise, every time a democratically elected government comes, it fails to deliver. So we must change this environment. An elected government must deliver in Pakistan. So in order to ensure that, there are things to be done. And they can be done only when a party or a person who enjoys this, as I said, the unity of thought and action between these three forces, he will be able to deliver.
And what will be if you were outlining your manifesto, what's the most important of the policies, of the things you'll introduce? What's the most important for your manifesto, as it were?
Well, the key issue is the people of Pakistan. I think we have to change the lot of the people of Pakistan. But in the short term, I think we have to deal with the terrorism and extremism in all its complexity, because otherwise we won't be able to move forward. Because if we want to straighten out the economy of Pakistan, it all gets related. We need to put the economy on an upsurge in order to deliver for the for the people of Pakistan, and that cannot be done well unless we defeat terrorism and extremism.
Pervez Musharraf there. When violence broke out following the disputed elections in Ivory Coast, the Côte d'Ivoire, the African Union sent Kenya's Prime Minister, Raila Odinga, to try and sort out the mess. He came back and came on the show straight away to say what he had found and what he had not found. Is there any danger, do you think, if President Gbagbo was forced out of office, that there could be civil war in the Côte d'Ivoire, or are you confident that can be avoided by negotiating the exit of President Gbagbo?
Yeah, you know that the country is highly polarized. There is the north-south divide. Then there is the issue of the indigenous Ivorians vis-a-vis the immigrant population, which is more than 2/3 of the total population. And then there is the Muslims and Christians. So I think that this requires some kind of unity. We need to have a reconciliation in order to unite the country, so that the ethnicization and the game of exclusion, which has been played for far too long, is resolved, and that the people are fully united. I think that Gbagbo has got some fanatical support among his people, and that unless there is a negotiated settlement, there may be civil war in the event that he was just driven out of power.
There may still be war. And of course, in fact,
Yeah.
Mr. Ouattara, the winner of the election, according to most of the nations in Africa and the world, he was, when you went to see President Gbagbo, he was effectively held prisoner in the Hotel du Golf in Abidjan, and it was reported that, in fact, President Gbagbo had said that he would lift all those restrictions around the hotel, and he would no longer be a virtual prisoner because he would be freer to move about. Has President Gbagbo done what he said he would do?
Yes, Mr. President Gbagbo gave us a firm undertaking. Indeed, he actually called his head of the army in our presence and gave instructions that the blockade should be lifted by noon the following day. I am disappointed to note that, or to learn that he has not done so, that he went back on his word, and that in fact he has not lifted the blockade, that Ouattara and his team are still locked up at the Golf Hotel in Abidjan. That, of course, shows that President Mr. Gbagbo does not intend to honor his words.
And that's it for this special program. Do join us again in 7 days' time from now for another Frost Over the World. Until then, bye-bye for now.